I'm Jim Groom. Thank you for staying. I know it's been long and I move a lot, so forgive me with the camera. I've been here before, and I'm going to actually try and keep this as focused as possible, because what Gardner and Alan talked about is kind of what I'm going to look at on a very practical level. And I'm going to look at how you might integrate the idea of storytelling into an experience in the classroom that may actually broach and breach and reimagine the idea of how you learn and teach as a community. So thinking about how the two work. But to tell that story, and it's funny, my narrative, listening to Alan talk about stories so much, I realized the story I'm going to tell in a very simple narrative is that, a story. It's a very personalized story, right? It's a kind of autobiopic, if you're into that whole thing. But it's this idea of, I started blogging back in 2004 as a way to deal with an issue. And the issue very specifically was the birth of my son. And that was kind of, there was a lot of cognitive dissonance around the idea of introducing a baby into this world that I realized I actually had to follow along with and be a father for. 9 years later, that's an issue I'm still telling and dealing with. But I didn't realize just how fundamental that was going to change who I was and how I dealt with this world. And it was really, blogging became a way for me to tell that story and to deal with that deep cognitive dissonance. And I dealt with it through storytelling. I actually started a blog, this is it. I started this in probably April of 2005, so about 3 or 4 months after my son was born. I had taken a ton of media of my son. I had one of those small Canon point and shoots that I first got, and I had a digital camera, and I actually could take pictures of him and take video. It was a remarkable thing. So I was not doing this alone, though, and this is important. A neighbor of mine, I lived in Brooklyn at the time, also had a blog called thisevilempire.com, and together we actually figured out, wait, we can create blogs. We can create sites where, and it was just like not a web, it was us two. Him, one street in Brooklyn, me in another, Mikhail Gershovich and me, sharing pictures of our kids. And it just so happened my wife's family lived in Italy, so they could see it. But it was just kind of like a small community of us playing and learning how this new application WordPress worked. And so this was Mikhail's space too, and we'll come back to this. So what was interesting is, so I had all this video of my son. And my video of my son was like, 2 months old, and I would set him on the bed and he'd fall down, and it was kind of like irresponsible dad caught on video. But it was interesting because I had all this stuff. And I was just realizing, and as I was surfing the web, and as the web kind of got interesting again, because from like 1998 to 2002, I wasn't a forum guy. I've never been a forum guy. So I didn't really find the web all that interesting. I'd go on there and search for stuff and use it very practically, but I didn't find it like exciting. And I started to change when I started to be able to build my own website in my own kind of commodity web hosting. Got a little bit more exciting. But not until I discovered the Internet Archive, which is a treasure trove of video from the day, right? That I really started to say, you know what? The web is awesome. So 2005, my son's 2 or 3 months old, I started creating these stupid videos. This is while I was supposed to be writing my dissertation. And
Civil defense film produced in cooperation with the Federal Civil Defense Administration and in consultation with the Safety Commission of the National Education Association.
so that's my son, who's now 9.
When there is a flash, duck and cover, and do it fast. First, you duck, and then you cover. And very tightly, you cover the back of your neck.
Bam.
And cover. Duck and cover. Duck and cover.
Okay, there it goes on. Yep, you're falling again. Yep.
Duck and cover.
So an afternoon with my son, experimenting with this, and he obviously keeps falling on the bed, and I figured out in iMovie, oh wait, you can do these flashes. Oh wait, I could take video freely off the web and cut it in with my son and make it like he's a 1950s child who's just kind of, survived the apocalypse by hiding under a table, which is an amazing fact. I wish I lived in the 50s so I could escape all apocalypse by putting my head over my head. But it just was an amazing revelation to me that I could actually start to deal with, I think really probably the most crazy 6 months of my life was once my son was born, until I started to come out of what seemed like a real bubble. And this storytelling was a way of dealing with it. But what was fascinating to me is I kind of used this as a way to move into another career. My dissertation wasn't going very well for a variety of reasons. I was trying to kind of do this, and so I started playing with it. So here's another video, and probably one of my favorites. Brooklyn Films. I was just joking around with this. It's another isn't my baby cute video, but there's a reason behind it. So Captain Miles was this joking name I came up with, right? And I started playing. You see, the titles get more sophisticated. That's a thing called a Who's It. Everyone in Brooklyn had it. It was like a stupid little baby toy. I don't know why everyone had it. But that's my son, right? You hear the music?
Yeah, we heard it too.
Hear it a little bit? No, okay. Well, it's the Jaws music. If I had a symphony, I would actually play it. Symphony, the Jaws music, right?
Now
Let's
you're
go. You hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch. I took this shot like for hours. Watch him. He's just sitting there. Right. And if you know anything about Spielberg, it's just setting it up. Just a fat baby chewing on a toy until. For me, this was it, right? Oh, it just lined up. It just worked. And I was sitting to myself, and obviously it's a terrible video. It's not, I'm going to get a job off this. But I started realizing that, unbelievable, the idea of taking all of this attention and all of this kind of really deep love and applying it to a vision of who we are and narrating it through a space that I can now tell a story to other people about who I was. It's what I was missing in academia. I don't feel like I could tell a story. I felt like I had to tell someone else's story because they were my dissertation director. Right? I had to basically push myself into that story. And I didn't want to be there. I actually wanted to be here. And that obviously is my own issue I had to work through. But I actually found a way to work through it. And I'll tell you how in a second. Because I think once you find something you love, your calling, whatever you find, there's a way to take that and to map it on top of what you're going to do. So about a year and a half later, I came to Mary Washington. I actually probably showed those videos to Gardner in my, because I actually interviewed with Gardner to get a job at Mary Washington. I probably showed Planet Miles, which is the site I built.
Yes,
a year and a half later, I came in and I worked with faculty at Mary Washington to think about how they bring media into their course room, how they tell the story of their course. It's funny that trailers should come up so much and storytelling should come up. This is a class that's actually Italian. Now, what we did is we set the students loose on the Internet Archive. And we told them, we want you to learn Italian. We want you to take anything you find from the Internet Archive and speak it in Italian and also subtitle it in Italian and tell the story in Italian. So, when you set students free on something, or set them loose, however you want to look at, you'd be surprised what you get. Here's one example. This is called Aliens. This is one of the best videos still I've seen yet. Notice the music.
Guarda qui, qualcosa sta volando verso di noi. Assomiglia a un'astronave.
È impossibile, non ci credo. Io devo vedere da me.
It's Italian.
Tu hai ragione, spero che quelli stranieri siano contenti.
And these are Americans trying to learn Italian. Just watch where the story goes.
Pronto? Chi è? Ti conosco.
That's what he's doing.
Mi dispiace, ma tu hai il numero sbagliato.
You must have the wrong number.
Wrong.
Davvero? Stranieri di Giove?
Because that's another video on the internet. There's some pizza love video. And then this thing.
Dobbiamo fare la pizza per gli stranieri, hanno molta fame. Ne faremo 3.
Per favore, io non capisco. Perché ti sei arrabbiato?
Se solo avessimo saputo che gli stranieri volevano le pizze rettangolari.
So all he wanted was a Sicilian-shaped pizza. And so they're all happy. Famous Italian recipe. Alan spoke a lot more eloquently than I have about thinking about music and shots. But the idea of found footage and taking a class as a group, as an experience, 30 people in a room, and saying to them, take what we have, think about what you've learned, and apply it across domains. And think about it, that deeper learning idea that you were talking about at lunch, something like this that's fun, that's exciting, that brings them together and brings them into an idea of deeper learning and actually embeds them in the media that we're actually communicating in anyway, I found my match. My Planet Miles videos found a home in instructional technology in some really amazing way. And the two are not unrelated. And so it's funny that we should go on and students, I'm teaching a variety of class students, we're starting to say, oh wait, there's a whole bunch of ways to actually creatively apply the work you're doing in a class to the World Wide Web. Like, as a class, not only editing a Wikipedia article, but starting. I taught a hard-boiled fish in class, and the students I work with built this entire Wikipedia article. And you might be saying to me, what the hell does Wikipedia have to do with the sciences or anything? Well, I would actually agree with you until this semester. This is a professor at Mary Washington, Steve Gallick. He teaches cell biology, histology. Fascinating guy. He's into everything, and he's really got a lot of curiosity. One of the things I was struck by is he was coming in, he's teaching an online course. And what he said is, I'm teaching a course about proteins. It's an upper level course about proteins. And he's like, there's no book about proteins. There's no one book. But the most comprehensive resource about proteins can be found on Wikipedia. So what he did is he went to Wikipedia and he collected like 400 articles about proteins. And he built them into a textbook that he has a copy of printed out for $400 or for $40, but all of his students get for free as a PDF. So what he did with this amazing open resource other people did is he built a specific resource custom for his class. Now, that to me is an amazing example of what the open web can bring you in terms of telling stories. But one of the things about Steve's work that I'm really blown away about is he's not just doing it as, okay, I'm going to build a textbook. He's actually doing something we'll call cell storytelling. And let me find the actual example because it's a really brilliant example. He has a course site where his students actually look at, under a microscope, cells. And one of the things he realized as this course was going on is you set up a microscope and his students would go with their digital cameras to study and take pictures of the cells. Well, they were uploading them to Facebook and creating books to study. And creating groups, I'm sorry, not books. Well, what happened here is he built a site where they could do that seamlessly in class and then start narrating the pictures. And so what this site is, it's 9 students who uploaded over 1,000 images of cells that they're narrating like a story. And it's open on the web, and it's getting a few thousand hits a month from people who are not at University of Mary Washington. And so it's the idea of the story they're telling that's helping them, and it's in the flow of their very class, is actually a narrative that transcends that class. And I think it's a story that's happening a lot now, that the stuff you do within the class is not limited to. And the experience is far broader and far more porous than we ever imagined. And I'm actually fascinated by this, and I'm surrounded by it. And it's part and parcel of what happened when we started thinking about this course, DS-106. DS-106 is a course, Alan alluded to it, and one of the things about it is it's a course specifically about storytelling. And it's a course specifically about thinking about what would happen if you took a class of 25 students and you thought with them very critically about what it means to tell stories in digital media. And you kind of frame that around digital photography, audio, video, mashups, etc. A lot of which you've seen examples of already. But then you said you're going to do it in your own space and you're going to syndicate it out so you control and manage and build your own identity. Right? And I think about it, those biology students, they all told stories through those cells. How can they own that and make it part of their own portfolio? How can they manage and control that? Which is a bigger question. But one of the things I never dreamed of coming out of DS-106 that did, and it's probably one of the coolest things, is I taught this class for a year before other people joined in as an open course. And I had 10 assignments, what I thought of as the 10 holy assignments, right? These were the 10 commandments. Tom Woodward suggested, why don't you build a bank where anyone could add assignments to, where anyone could build on top of it? And we did. And people started submitting assignments from all over the world. And my students started submitting assignments to this bank that actually people in Portugal or Australia were doing. They were doing the assignments. And my students came in and were actually like, oh wait, not only are we populating them and reading each other's work, other people are reading and commenting on our work, whether it be visual assignments, video assignments, and doing them. And it's a remarkable sense of empowerment for those students to watch that happen. Now, DS-106 is an interesting case, and it's linked to digital storytelling, but I would argue that the work that Galic's doing with those histology, that cell storytelling, is a form of storytelling that's just as germane to the process of letting the students narrate their work. Another example here, and it's for a literature course, but it actually struck me. There's one of the famous things is, for Hemingway, there's something called a 6-word story. And the story basically goes like this. Baby shoes for sale, never worn. Or something to that account. It's a pretty intense story, right? What happened to the baby? Why were they never worn? Right? Just 6 words. How powerful, that idea of minimalism. We started playing with this idea of take 6 words from any story in a Hemingway story and make a shirt out of it. So here's one. These are all from In Our Time. Here's the ruins of a house. There are old ruin, Nick. There's our old ruin, Nick. And that's about their relationship. It's about the landscape. It's about the time of World War I. And it always be interesting to me is, how could you ask a student if they were to make a shirt about a concept they learned? What would it look like? How could you kind of bring it down, boil it down to the essential idea as a form of an experiment, kind of like the trailer? How do you boil down the essential notion of what your class is and how it's being taken? Now, one of the most fascinating parts to me, and it's kind of what I wanted to talk about, Alan could talk to you about the Daily Create, amazing idea. Basically, he built a site where students go to as part of DS-106 and they do an assignment once a day. creative assignment. Could be writing, could be photography, could be video, etc. It's amazing as an exercise. But the thing for storytelling that I'm really thinking about that I think cuts across all disciplines and can be thought of in any way, and for me this is really the ideal that I want to work towards with the university, what I want to see happen, is what would happen if you built a radio station that had programming from the humanities, but also had programming from the sciences. You asked a student as part of your assignment, explain reactions in 3 minutes. Make it creative, think about how other people are using radio, find a digital lab or form a digital lab where people get help, so it's not only your responsibility, but ask them to tell that story. Whether it be inorganic or organic chemistry, whether it be Spanish literature, whether it be Australian history. What if you had a radio station where you took the idea of podcasting, and maybe you did that as an assignment, but you had a place where people would go and watch it and hear it. Kind of a commons area for that. And we've been experimenting with that as part of DS-106. When we first started doing this class, it exploded. 500 people signed up, but we kind of committed we didn't want to use Blackboard. We didn't want to use Illuminate, because Illuminate leaves no trail, and it's not accessible in the same way. We wanted something that had a trail, a recording, an archive. So we set up, or more specifically, Grant Potter, who was in British Columbia at the time, set up a radio station. And people started kind of listening to the class as it happened. They started programming stuff. They started upload the stories that are compelling to them. And what happened is a community was born out of it. And if you want to tell compelling stories to people about things, a community's in order. You have to bring people together, and you have a community. That's the beauty of the university that Gardner was talking about beforehand. The community is kind of baked in. People are self-selecting. They came here for a reason. They want to learn, I think. But I don't know if we're giving them the access and implications to learn, the spaces to learn, that common structure to learn. And so I wonder if part of our classes, rather than taking the same test or doing the same essay, was actually a product you were building to educate your community and potentially beyond. That to me is the key. And it's kind of just that strange, seems strange, but it's not, movement where you just rotate the work you're doing to be web-facing, to be public-facing. You know, one of the things that Alan did that I thought was really awesome is he loosened up the room. People came together. They're not afraid to do things. They're not afraid to share. And I think we can establish that. But what is your university doing more broadly to establish that? Whether it be through a radio station or, and this is my favorite one I've been kind of pounding recently, a TV station. My class also has a TV station. Do your class have a radio station and a TV station? What we call the vertical and the horizontal? And this is not to say, DS-106 was its own crazy bubble. I don't know if I could say that, for example, is the model. But what is the model is that people went out of their way to share. I'll go back to Mikhail Gershovich. This is the guy in Brooklyn who I spent hours upon hours building baby blogs with. Fast forward 8 years. We're still doing the same thing in higher ed. He's running a teaching center. I'm an instructional technologist. He's on DS-106 radio, so am I. He has a narrative that his family has been telling for his whole life. So for 40 years now, basically. I'd say 33. When he was 7 years old, his family uprooted from Riga, Latvia, which was part of the Soviet Union at the time, and then they came to America via Italy. And this is a story that is so practiced. They sit down, they drink vodka, they eat crocodile or something like that, and they tell the story again and again and again. And it's a compelling story. Misha, that's how she calls Mikhail. Misha, when you were 7, I took you by the arms in my arms and we ran across. And it's a beautiful story. And he knows what he's going to say, and she knows what she's going to say. And they practice this because it's a story, the narrative that's defined them as a family. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's an awesome thing. And it's probably never the same. And as he gets his PhD, it changes too, because as a kid, as their kid coming here, he accomplished something. They didn't do it for nothing. His father was almost 40 years old when they did it. It's a radical life move. And what's interesting to me is every campus, every person, even in this room, would have a story that's similar to tell. And that's where this class kind of changed me. Because I realized I was hearing the narratives of hundreds of people, not just what they learned or how they learned it. And I wonder if UMW, I'll speak, I won't talk about put Sagrado on the spot, I wonder if we as a school couldn't do this. Not only to learn more about what we're learning, but to learn more about who's learning it and how. Because every way you share the way you learn is you're sharing a piece of who you are. And these are the networks that allow for it. That's the revolution. It's a revolution of sharing who you are through these spaces, akin to blogging. And I think it actually transcends discipline. We, as a result, built a TV station for our group. And we started doing something that I think was pretty awesome. We started going around and interviewing faculty about their expertise. What do you know? Why are you here? It's that same question. What is your discipline that kept you compelled? Right? And that would be a fascinating narrative. And your students could be part of it. Why are they here? And you often see them as kind of promotion for a school. Hi, I'm Jill. I love Sagrado. There's nothing wrong with Sagrado. Sagrado's the best. Don't touch Archangel Michael, or else you're going to be in trouble. Thanks, and stay off the grass. Right? That's a public service announcement. People know it. But it's a different thing when Jill gets on there and she tells you her story. And why she's studying, and what faculty member touched her, and how. That's what it's about. And we have the mechanism, because I had it 9 years ago when my son was 6 months, to tell a stupid story about him falling off over the bed. And I just think that what Gardner and Alan said perfectly comes together here in some ways because the tools have been there for years. Right? This is trailing edge technology, to quote John Udell. We can do it. It's not a technological problem. It's a cultural problem. At UMW, at VCU, wherever you are, it's not specific to Sagrado. But if you want to get at interesting ways of rethinking disciplines, the way at it is to start trying to tell the stories alongside your students. And for me, I mean, you gave some great examples of how to go about it. But it's just amazing to me when I think about the technology we have to do it. We started a media server, pretty simple. And this is an example of me sitting down with our librarian, Jack Bells, who's actually doing amazing research right now on the Chicago Cubs. And it was a fun day. I got to sit down with him for an hour and talk specifically about his research. And this is a video that's now been viewed 232 times by people on campus. I want to believe that's 232 people on campus now know more about who they work alongside. And I think that's what builds community. It would here, it would there, it would anywhere. Simple. I mean, to me, it's dead simple. Now, I haven't stopped there, and this is awesome. You see, this is a class I'm teaching now, and they're actually building animated GIFs, which makes me very happy because I didn't do that one. But this is an example of what I'm trying to think through in a course, and I'll stop. And this has been a dream of mine, and I'm doing it right now, and we'll see how it goes. We already did our first video installation. I broke the course up into three sections. Colonial crime through about 1865. And then 1865 to about 1950, basically about the time In Cold Blood comes out. And then 1965, Manson up through now. So three sections of the course. Kind of think of it as survey of true crime in American literature and film. So what we're doing is, I'm having the students, it's a seminar, it's a freshman seminar, I'm having them introduce the sections every week. They talk about it, they run the class. Week 6, they make a video about what they talked about. So each group has to come up with a video on the fly. I don't care how they make it. And at the end of that, it's a half-hour episode of true crime. Part 1, part 2, part 3. My idea is I think there's great value to pushing them to do that quick, on the fly, and try and synthesize and integrate what they learned in a very short period of time. That's 6 weeks, there's no class. It's just lab. They come in, they come to the green screen, and we shoot. They come with scripts. If they don't have a script, they're not allowed in. And they're being forced to produce knowledge, to share back to the community what it is they learned. And to me, that's what's really compelling about media right now. It's not about the brochure. It's about how we have hundreds, if not thousands of people on these campuses who are doing amazing work, but no one's sharing it. More than that, they're not sharing it in a compelling way. So we're doing it like this: true crime, America. And then I'll be there in a wig talking about blah, 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 and then we'll introduce the episodes. There'll be commercials, there'll be trailers for some of the works we've done. It will be a full-blown event. And it will be something they created. And judging by the first one we did, it was a blast. For 10 days, they were all in. And I knew it. And I'm not saying every class can do this. Like Alan said, this isn't for everyone. I understand that. My question would be, why isn't it? You know, why not? I mean, this is the moment we're in. You know, it's a fun one. And you don't have to know the tools. That's the funny thing. Like, people are like, well, I do that, but I don't know iMovie. I don't know Final Cut. It's like, well, it's good if you did, but I'm not sure you have to. You should have an idea of how it works. You should think about how Cinemagramma works yourself. But that's not necessarily the point. You know, I don't know how different it is from thinking about them showing you what they learned in a paper or a test. And it doesn't all have to be high stakes. Oh, this wouldn't work in Hollywood. I'm sorry, I'm not going to accept it for this class. That's not my standard. So, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. You guys have been very patient, and then we're pushing on 3. Question?
What's the time?
Yeah, let's see that.
Okay. It's almost time.
I know.
But
I'm a big fan.
just one remark. What I like that, and what I would like to develop strategies as you have, and I think you all have shown in a way in each respective endeavor, is to develop these strategies that allow faculty to do this, to experiment, to do courses not in the usual linear way. Not that that is wrong in itself, but I think it's very valuable to take what's available, especially from the web, and use it. And use it in creative ways, giving the right of speech to students whom often do not have that right.
Yeah, and it's funny, the mashup course, like the mashup one we did, that happened in like 2007? Maybe, that's a long time ago. 2008 latest. And that was someone we didn't do. DS-106 was just, it wasn't even an idea. And it's funny, I found that a faculty did a lot of experimental stuff. I mean, they were making Wikipedias, they were building their own media wiki, they were having their students edit articles. They were doing stuff on the open web, and they were giving back, you know? And, you know, whether it's open educational resources, whatever that means, because it's a wide ocean of resources. But for me, it was always more and more, it's almost DS-106 served a purpose of showing people how it was done, but it almost served a kind of negative purpose. That people said, sure, you can do that because you're tech savvy, you're media savvy. The fact is no. This goes across disciplines, and obviously you have support in-house to help you. But the idea is, not so much the media is coming up and building in an approach. I found with the true crime class what really helped me is I'm co-teaching it with someone from the University of Pittsburgh. And what happened is I was really forced to sit down and rethink the class. And from the ground up, 5 weeks, change it and build in time so I'm not just trying to cover content. Build in time for creation.
What's the major of that class?
The major of this class, there's no major. It's actually what we're doing at Mary Washington. It's called a freshman seminar. And the point of the class is actually to get students together, to think like scholars, and also imagine stuff. And, you know, I kind of debated this. One of the things I've found, and I kind of come to terms with it, is, am I doing them a disservice by not having them write a paper, a formal research paper? And I justified it for myself by saying no, because that's pretty much all they're going to do over the next 4 years. And I don't think it's a bad thing. But I'm wondering if we couldn't organize and maybe syncopate the idea of creation in different ways across disciplines, and maybe organize that some way without being constrictive and suffocating. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to take all of this in, and I'm struck by how cinema becomes a metaphor for everything you're doing. Even more than storytelling, that idea of cinema. I don't know, there's something there. I mean, there's a way in which I mean, I became fascinated with my students last spring when they were using all these animated GIFs, and I connected it suddenly with what happened in the Doug Engelbart video, where he's having the words move on the screen, and I said, so the words move, and I said to them, what does that mean, the words move? And I started thinking about how writing is dead if it's not moving. You know, what if you write the way you think about movie making? You establish a virtual scene in somebody else's head, and you bring that to life, and all those skills, editing, and how close are you, and how detached, and there's a way in which the whole cinema metaphor, you know, it's like hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. Well,
They may not be tech savvy, but they've seen a lot of movies, right?
they have, and I'm finding in this class, this is interesting, and we really gave them free reign. And one of the things they did that I found was really fascinating is they had Cotton Mather as the game show host. And they had 3 of the crime narratives we'd read. One was Joseph Mountain, who was an African American who actually went over to England and became a hardcore highway robber, like a highwayman. He was like famous, the best of the best. Another one was William Fly, who was a famous pirate. So Cotton Mather would ask them questions, but we also read Foucault about discipline and punish. So he would ask them questions like Foucault to these 3 people, and they would sit, and it was a game show. So they were actually making Foucault palatable by putting in Cotton Mather, and he would dress up, and they were playing with everything we'd learned, and it's not like they forgot it. They were mixing it up, and they were making it relevant to them, and they were having fun with it. And I was like, you know, just that small space you open up to have fun, whether it's organic chemistry, and you were talking about your daughter ready to kind of kill herself about the organic, well, maybe that's overstated, but you know what I mean. She's having trouble with it. I'm not saying there's any one way to teach it. I'm not a chemist, so I don't want to pretend. But what would it mean to offer another way at it? You know, I just saw someone's thesis where they acted out a physics concept through Bohemian Rhapsody. They basically mapped the whole master's thesis onto Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody. And it was, I think, someone would have to check the science, but in terms of teaching and communicating and effect, it was amazing. And I think the point that Alan made earlier is how much do you lose in the communication of an idea through cinema? You know, cinema for me in some ways is, you know, the holy trinity of sound, narrative, and photography. It's not that any one of them need to be privileged, but when you put them all together, it creates some kind of magic. And I believe that's not discipline specific. And I think that's the funnest thing about the moment work, is that you could be, DS-106 as an example was more an excuse for us to get back as tech into that realm of creating. And say, bring that to our faculty. What are you doing in the classroom that's creative? And as an example, we had a faculty member take animated GIFs and use them to demonstrate scenes in a film. Well, could you also use an animated GIF to demonstrate a particular reaction? How cells move under a microscope? There's no reason why you can't animate a GIF on an electron microscope and show you a pattern of something happening within the cell. And I just wonder if what we're doing in any discipline isn't only limited by what we already have done. That makes any sense.
It makes.
All right. Well, thank you all. You're very patient.
I think it's time we went down to the theater, so this is why I think. Thank you all.